What's up, Wisconsin Deca, and welcome back to another Competitive Excellence Series video. I'm Dave Metzger from Port Washington High School, and today we'll be covering the topic of storytelling within a business presentation. I personally think this is a really interesting topic and something you can totally use to put your role plays on top. But first, let's switch into something a little more comfortable. That feels a lot better, so without further ado, let's hop on the computer and get into it.
So a little bit more about me before we begin. I've been in DECA for 3 years and I compete in quick serve restaurant management, and I've been to SCDC for 2 years and I've been to ICDC once in Atlanta. And last year I qualified but did not attend. So without further ado, let's get into it. So what is storytelling within a business context? So here I provided the dictionary definition: storytelling, noun, the activity of telling or writing stories. But really, when you're making a presentation, storytelling is a little more than that. So it's creating a compelling narrative within your presentation beyond just statistics and numbers. And so what it does is it aids in keeping judges and your audience engaged with your presentation. And so at the end of the day, when you're storytelling, by the time you're done sharing a story, your brand values should be more effectively communicated through your relatability and your personability. Now this will come through the form of your story. And storytelling might kind of sound like an abstract idea, and that is because it definitely is. It's not something you can always concretely ingrain into your presentation, but you can always use aspects of storytelling, which we'll get into in a moment. So these are the stories of brands. And so branding and storytelling are really intertwined. And so when you're giving a presentation, you really have to keep that in mind. Oh, that rhymed. Anyway, these are just a few examples I could think of off the top of my head, but most notably is Shark Tank. And what the sharks are looking for is not only a really solid and concrete business model with really solid numbers to back them up. That's always the foundation, which we'll get into later. But the sharks are also looking for someone who can give them a story, or someone who can give them a passion as to why they're doing it. And so that's really what sets a lot of the sharks apart, a lot of the Shark Tank products apart, is just a really good story that goes along with the product. So how do you go about sharing a story? Well, a lot of the best stories are not going to be your own. They're going to be testimonials. And so you can always take an experience that you've heard from a friend, but you should never make it the foundation of your roleplay or the argument or the idea you're trying to put forward during your presentation. Testimonials should only aid in your ideas. And so you can also use your personal experiences, and you can always use statistics, but it always helps in aiding that statistic with a story of how you got there, or how you got the statistic, or why the statistic is especially important. But at the end of the day, what storytelling is looking to achieve is a stronger pathos and ethos with your presentation. And so logos, which is logic, should always be the foundation of your story or your presentation. And so just adding on storytelling should always increase how credible you are or the emotional response you get from a judge. So how do you actually do that? Well, I have some fun rhymes. You have connecting it, so you connect it. So you come up with the story. You analyze the situation, and you think about different ways you can actually put your own experience, a testimonial, or explain some statistics that you think of within the role play or presentation itself. Then you explain it. You elaborate on it for the judge or whoever you're talking to. You want to make sure they thoroughly get what you're talking about when you get the story. You never want to go on tangents about your mom's best friend from college whenever you make a story or whenever you ingrain a story. And so that's the last one, ingrain. So you always want to make sure you follow through with it. You fully flush it out, and you keep coming back to it in the presentation. That's why it's ingrained. It just keeps coming back throughout the 10 minutes or however long you have to present. I love my acronyms. And so, what does this look like during a role play? Well, effective storytelling is effective communication. And so what that means is that when you effectively tell a story, it should always be the ways you effectively communicate with any person during a presentation. You make eye contact, you use hand gestures when appropriate, you emphasize words when appropriate. All these things can really help with your story to not only make more sense to your judge, but ultimately leave your judge with a greater impression of the idea that you're trying to get across. And so you can do this with ha-has and wah-wahs. And so ha-has and wah-wahs are just laughs and emotional responses from your judge. You can throw in a funny joke in there. And so I also have in this bullet point, stories aren't always fully ingrained. That's what I mean by throwing a joke. Jokes are really small stories or just small little clever bits you throw in there. And so another thing a lot of people are worried about is professionalism and how professional you sound when you're actually going off tangent, off script a little bit to tell a story. And so as long as you know your audience, I'm going to argue, and I think it's fair to argue, that it's okay to be a little off topic and to be a little more personable with your judge. That's why you shake their hand at the beginning of the role play, because you realize that this is not only a business transaction, but you're also looking a fellow person eye to eye. And so as long as you're always maintaining professionalism, posture, eye contact, all of those things, judges, it never hurts to see you smile. That's what I'm trying to say. And so a lot of them remain stone-faced, but you can just show them you care by putting some of your outside experience or outside knowledge into your role play. And so that's what storytelling really tries to get at. What can you put inside of a role play to make you and to put you at the top? And so a lot of the time people throw in statistics, and they're really fun to make up. I see a lot of people make pie charts. I love making pie charts during my role plays. You have to be careful. They can leave your judge shrugging and nodding along if they're not 100% applicable. And so giving them something to connect to greatly helps with your role play. So that's something to connect to is often just a story or a personal experience you have along with the statistic, or just further explaining why it is ingrained into your presentation. And so that's a thing I feel a lot of presenters just miss. Always explaining why something is in your presentation. I always miss that, especially when writing a paper that is presented to an audience. Why are statistics there to begin with? And so finally, how do we keep all of this personable? Stories. Duh. Keep using personal anecdotes from the real world, and even corny jokes. And so those are all ways you can keep your judge engaged during your role play. So, in conclusion, it sounds like a daunting task, but storytelling means that you should never be afraid to take a risk during your presentation, especially if you feel really confident in your presentation skills and your roleplay skills. You should always try to take that risk and put in a little bit of extra pizzazz into your roleplay. But yeah. And so effectively storytelling leaves not just your judge, but your audience with a greater sense of your purpose or your message that you wanted to give to them in the first place. The idea that you were trying to present. And remember, CEI, connect, explain, ingrain, and those are just the 3 words that you can use to remember how to effectively tell a story during your presentation. So I'm Dave Metzger from Port Washington, DECA. Feel free to email me at dmetzger763@gmail.com with any questions. And thank you for listening, Wisconsin DECA.